Chapter 1: The Morning He Left. I remember the mug more than the words. White ceramic, a chip on the handle. He held it loosely in one hand like it might fall and he wouldn't care. I don't love you anymore, Marie. No lightning, no thunder, just a quiet sentence dropped like a coin on tile, dull, final, and small. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, still wearing my robe, hair tied back, socks mismatched, 30 years of history behind me, and not a single word in my mouth. He didn't look at me, not really. His eyes were on the mug, or maybe past it, somewhere else entirely, somewhere I'd stopped existing in long ago. He had already packed a single duffel bag, his favorite jacket, a few shirts, his shaving kit. I hadn't even noticed the drawers growing emptier. It's been coming for a while, he said. You knew that. Did I? Maybe I did. Maybe I had known for years. But when you build a life around someone, you stop checking the foundation. You just keep repainting the walls. That afternoon, the house felt like a stranger. The sofa where we'd watched 1,000 quiet evenings, it sagged differently. The kitchen hummed with an unfamiliar silence. Our bed, our sheets, our photographs, none of it felt like mine. I tried to cry. I really did, but I couldn't find the tears. Just a vast, dry ache that pulsed behind my ribs. That night, I lay in bed, diagonally, like I was floating on a raft in the middle of a dark ocean. There was so much space beside me, it felt violent. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed against my ears like a scream. At 2:14 a.m., I got up and made tea. Green jasmine, his favorite, out of habit, out of muscle memory. Then I poured it down the drain and made chamomile instead. I sat by the window and watched the moonlight stretch across the floor like a thin blanket. I whispered into the dark, what do I do now? And the house, this suddenly echoing shell of a life, had no answer. But somewhere in that silence, a sliver of truth began to form. Small, sharp, undeniable. I had no idea who I was without him. And maybe that's where I had to begin. Chapter 2: The Day After. The morning after he left, I woke before the sun. It was automatic, years of habit waking me at 6:30, even though there was no longer a reason. No coffee to make for him, no laundry to start, no voice to say morning hun from across the hall, just silence, and the strange hum of a house that was still full of furniture but emptied of meaning. I sat at the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. This is my life now, I thought. Just me, no rush to get dressed, no plans, no appointments. I didn't even check my phone. I was afraid of the pity texts that had started trickling in last night. My sister, one of our old couple friends, that awful group chat I'd muted years ago. Thinking of you, so sorry to hear. Let me know if you need anything. They meant well, but I wasn't ready to reply. I didn't know what I needed. I didn't even know how to move. I walked downstairs barefoot. The tiles felt colder than I remembered. In the kitchen, the clock above the stove ticked like a heartbeat, steady, loud, and annoyingly alive. I made toast and didn't eat it. I poured orange juice and stared at it. Eventually, I wandered into the living room and sat on the couch we'd bought together after our second child was born. The fabric was faded, the cushions slightly deflated, but it was ours, or had been. I looked around at the framed photographs on the wall. Weddings, birthdays, trips to places we'd pretended to enjoy for the kids' sake. There we were, smiling, matching sweaters, leaning into each other like gravity, always pulled us together. I wanted to tear them down. I wanted to hug them. I wanted to forget. I wanted to remember. I didn't cry until the afternoon, not until I opened the closet to get a sweater and found his cologne still sitting on the shelf. That stupid blue glass bottle with the silver cap, the one I always hated, and just like that, the sob hit me, sharp, from the stomach, not the throat. I sat on the floor and wrapped my arms around my knees and wept like a woman who had just realized her life wasn't paused. It had ended. Not death, but something worse in some ways. Because when someone dies, the world brings casseroles and flowers. But when your husband leaves after 30 years, People don't know what to say, so they say nothing. And that silence is louder than grief. Eventually, I got up. I opened a window, let the cold air bite into my skin, let myself feel real again. I made tea, not for him, not for both of us, just for me. I drank it slowly, like I had all the time in the world, because suddenly, I did. Chapter 3, The Questions You Can't Ask Anyone. There are questions you never think to ask while you're still married. Like, did he ever really see me? Would he have stayed if I had gotten sick instead of older? Was it love or just momentum? Questions that don't have answers, not real ones, but they echo anyway. They rattle through your chest when you're washing dishes or brushing your teeth. They wait for you at the bottom of every cup of tea. 3 days after he left, I found myself in the attic. I don't remember deciding to go up there. I just remember dust, old boxes, that strange feeling of time standing still. And then, there it was, a cardboard box marked wedding, our wedding. Inside, the dried bouquet, brown and brittle, the veil I never let our daughters play with, the photo album with the gold ribbon I tied around it myself. I opened it slowly and stared at the photos like I was looking at ghosts. There we were, young, blurry, smiling, my cheeks round with hope, his eyes lit with something I thought was love. But hindsight is cruel. It makes you read between lines that were never spoken. Was he ever truly happy? Did I love him or the idea of him? Was I just afraid to be alone? Even then? I closed the album, put it back in the box. And for the first time in years, I said out loud, I don't know who I am without him. And maybe I never really did. I wish I could say that moment brought me clarity. It didn't, but it brought honesty. A quiet honesty that settled in my chest like the weight of warm stone. Not peace, not yet. But the beginning of something true. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed with the lights off, hand over my heart, and let the questions come. Let them swirl, let them ache. I didn't try to answer them. I just let them be. And somewhere between the questions and the dark, I realized I hadn't spoken to myself in years. Not really, not like this. And so I whispered to the silence, I see you. I know you're hurting, but I'm still here. And in that tiny act of recognition, something shifted. Just a little, but enough. Chapter 4, The Mirror and the Stranger. I hadn't really looked at myself in years, not truly. Not beyond checking if mascara smudged or if my blouse matched my skirt. Not beyond the glance you give your reflection when you're rushing to be what the day expects of you. But that morning, I stopped, and I looked. The mirror was cruel, as mirrors often are when you're alone. I studied the woman staring back at me, eyes that had dulled from waiting too long to be chosen, lines that hadn't been kissed in a very long time, skin that no longer pretended to glow. My hair had silver threads in it now, not dramatic, just soft reminders that time had passed while I was too busy being someone else's anchor. I saw the woman I'd become, and she startled me, because I didn't recognize her. But even more terrifying, I wasn't sure I ever had. Who was I before I became his wife? Who was I when no one needed me to be anything? These questions burn deeper than the ones about him. Because the hardest part of losing someone you love is realizing how much of you went with them. Not because they took it, but because you gave it away, piece by piece. Small trades, compromises you called love. And one day you wake up and you're a shape that only fits next to someone who's no longer there. I touched the glass, fingertips against cold surface. She stared back, this stranger me, sad but not broken, tired but somehow still alive beneath it all. You're still here, I whispered. I see you. It wasn't a breakthrough. There was no swell of music, no flood of relief, just this quiet moment, woman and mirror, truth and reflection. But something loosened inside me, like the first knot of grief untied itself, not to disappear, but to move. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over 15 years. I went for a walk alone. No errands, no destination, no schedule, just me. The sun was low golden, the breeze smelled of dry leaves, and for a few seconds, I didn't feel hollow. I felt curious about the world, about myself, about what it might mean to begin again at 55. Not because I chose to, but because life gave me no other option. And maybe that was a kind of grace. Chapter 5, Small Rituals for One. It started with tea, not the one he liked, not the bold black blends he used to insist on every morning, as if strength came in bitter doses. No, I made jasmine, soft, floral, delicate in a way I had forgotten I liked. I placed the cup on the kitchen table and sat there alone. No phone, no distractions, just steam curling into the morning air like a quiet offering. It was the first thing I did for me, not because of him, in what felt like years. I began to notice the way light touched the windows at different times of day, how birds gathered on the fence line at 7:40 each morning, how silence, once unbearable, could feel like a warm sweater instead of a cold room. Little things, tiny rituals. I started lighting a candle in the bathroom before my showers, choosing my clothes like I had somewhere to go, even if I didn't, brushing my hair slowly, putting lotion on my hands before bed, and letting the scent stay with me through the night. It wasn't about moving on. I hated that phrase. It was about returning to the parts of myself I had abandoned, to the woman who used to hum while folding laundry, to the girl who once loved red nail polish, even though he said it was too much, to the version of me that had dreams no one asked about. And so, eventually, I stopped asking too. One afternoon, I baked banana bread, just one loaf. I sat on the counter as it baked, breathing in the smell of sugar and cinnamon, and something that felt suspiciously like peace. When it cooled, I cut a slice, buttered it, and ate it slowly. No kids to feed, no husband to impress, no one to say why bother. I was the reason. And that, I was learning, was enough. Later that week, I cleared out the garage. Boxes of memories, high school yearbooks, the girls' old report cards, Christmas decorations we hadn't used in 5 years, and then in the very back behind a stack of forgotten suitcases, my easel, paint splattered, crooked, but mine. I had painted before marriage, before babies, before responsibility and routine pulled my hands into other kinds of work. I pulled it out, set it up by the window, bought a new set of brushes from the little art shop downtown. I didn't know what I would paint, but I wanted to begin again with color. These weren't dramatic changes. I wasn't climbing mountains or booking flights or posting declarations of freedom on social media. I was just making tea, lighting candles, breathing again. And in those rituals, so small they might seem invisible to anyone else, I was rebuilding. Not the life we had, not the marriage we lost, but the woman I was before I forgot myself. Chapter 6, The Day I Didn't Cry. It hit me while brushing my teeth, the kind of realization that arrives not with trumpets, but in the quiet, when your mind is drifting and your body is just moving through routine. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, mouth half full of foam, and thought, I didn't cry today. Not in the morning, not during breakfast, not after reading old messages or standing too long in front of our bedroom closet. I hadn't cried, and it felt strange. Not triumphant, not like a milestone reached or a chapter closed, just still, like the surface of a lake after weeks of storm. I rinsed my mouth, wiped my face with a towel, and leaned against the sink. Okay, I whispered, okay, because that's all I could manage. It wasn't a celebration. It wasn't pride. It was a fragile, almost guilty relief, like I'd broken some unspoken rule of grief by not collapsing. But grief doesn't have rules. And maybe, just maybe, that was something I needed to learn. That day, I let myself enjoy things. I painted, nothing special, just broad strokes, messy and unplanned. I put on earrings, even though no one would see them. I made soup from scratch. humming as I stirred. I read a few chapters of a book I'd been ignoring for months, not to escape, but because the words felt good again. In the afternoon, I sat on the porch with a blanket and a mug of tea. It was cool, the sky silver with clouds, and the wind carried the faintest smell of pine. And for the first time in weeks, I let the silence comfort me, not haunt me, not press against my chest like it had before, just comfort. I didn't think of him much, not in anger, not in longing, just not at all. And that might have been the strangest part of the whole day. Not that I didn't cry, but that I didn't miss him while I didn't cry. It didn't mean the pain was gone. I knew it would come back. Grief has a way of circling, gentle one moment, sharp the next. But healing was in that in-between, in the soft realization that there were still parts of me untouched by loss, parts that remembered how to live without permission, parts that knew how to feel joy, even quiet joy, and didn't apologize for it. That night, as I slipped into bed, I whispered, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, just to the day, for being gentle, for being ordinary, for not breaking me. Chapter 7, The Letter I Never Sent. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, cloudy, the kind of sky that made the world feel a little softer. I was cleaning out the second drawer in the kitchen, the one full of pens that don't work, expired coupons, keys I never remembered the purpose of. And then I saw it, a pack of pale blue stationery I'd bought years ago. I remember thinking I'd write more handwritten letters back then. I never did. But that day, I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out a sheet, and wrote, "Dear Thomas." I didn't plan it. My hand just moved, as if the words had been waiting in my body for far too long. And once they started, they wouldn't stop. You left me quietly, without drama, without shouting. And somehow that hurt even more, because it made me realize that whatever we were had already died long before you said the words. You said you didn't love me anymore. And what I never said back was this: I don't think you loved me for a long time. Maybe I didn't love you either. Not really. Maybe we just loved the habit of each other. The ink smudged slightly where my hand trembled. I'm not writing this because I want you back. I don't. I'm writing this because silence can rot the soul, and I was silent for far too long. I made myself small for you. I forgot how to laugh too loudly. I gave up dreams without telling you, just to make space for yours. You never asked for that, but you never noticed either. And that, Thomas, that was the loneliest part. I paused then, my hand hovering over the paper. I felt no rage, no tears, just a kind of sacred stillness, like the truth was a balm I didn't know I needed. Sometimes I wonder if you miss me. Not the wife, not the mother, not the woman who kept the house steady, but me, Marie, the girl who used to sing while she chopped onions, the woman who once danced in her nightgown when no one was watching. She's coming back, slowly, quietly, like spring after a bitter winter. And when she's here fully, I think I'll be proud of her, even if no one else ever is. Goodbye, Thomas. Not in bitterness, not in blame, but in truth, in release. Marie, I folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, wrote no address, sealed nothing. I placed it in the drawer next to the tea, not to be sent, not to be read, just to exist. Because sometimes putting something into words is the only way to set yourself free from it. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Chapter 8, Brunch with Women Who Knew. It had been almost 2 months since Thomas left when Claire called. Her voice, soft, low, familiar, came through the phone like music I hadn't realized I missed. "We're doing brunch on Sunday," she said. "The girls, nothing fancy, just time together." The girls. That used to mean something once. Claire, Joanne, Melissa, and me. Coffee in mismatched mugs, stories that unraveled into laughter, shared wine on porches, and comfort in silences too. And then life happened. Or rather, we let it. Kids, husbands, mortgages, and somewhere in the middle of all that, we forgot to call. Or maybe we just forgot how much we needed each other. I almost said no. Something in me, the part still bruised, still ashamed, whispered that I didn't belong anymore. But then I thought of the letter I never sent, and how healing only happens when we let light in. "I'll come," I said. And I meant it. Claire's house was warm with the smell of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee. Joanne hugged me too tightly. Melissa cried the moment she saw me. And Claire, as always, was the anchor, calm, steady, present. We sat around her kitchen table like we used to, plates full, hearts hesitant. "You look good, Marie," Joanne said, tired, but clearer somehow. I smiled, unsure how to answer, but Claire just nodded, like someone who finally hears her own voice again. We didn't talk about him right away. We talked about their kids, their jobs, Melissa's new Pilates obsession, Claire's mother's knee surgery. And then, after the second round of coffee, it came. "I always wondered," Melissa said softly, "if you were happy. You just faded for a while." "We saw it," Joanne added, "but we didn't know how to ask." I looked at them. Women who had known me before wifehood swallowed my name, before motherhood blurred my lines. "I didn't know how to ask either," I said. I think I thought silence was safer. There was no pity in their eyes, just a kind of gentle recognition, like they too had worn masks, like they too had stood at the edge of themselves and wondered what was left. "You didn't deserve to disappear like that," Claire said, "but we're so glad you're coming back." And in that moment, I realized I had friends. Not perfect ones, not always present ones, but women who saw me, who had missed me, who were willing to sit with the broken pieces and not flinch. Before I left, Claire pressed something into my hand, a folded paper. "Open it when you get home," she whispered. Later, in the quiet of my kitchen, I unfolded it. It was a quote, handwritten, familiar. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Anais Nin, I pinned it to the fridge, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a woman starting over. I felt like a woman becoming. Chapter 9, A Man at the Market. It was a Saturday. I had gone to the farmer's market to buy peaches, not because I needed them really, but because the weather was warm and something inside me wanted to be outside. Surrounded by people, sound, movement, life. I hadn't worn makeup. My hair was tied back. A linen shirt, jeans, sandals. Simple. Comfortable. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. Until I realized someone was looking at me. He was standing at the honey stall, gray at the temples, tall, holding a small jar and squinting at the label like it held state secrets. I wouldn't have noticed him at all if he hadn't looked up and met my eyes, and smiled, not that polite, distant smile people give strangers, but a soft one, curious, steady, warm. I looked away instinctively, heart suddenly loud. Ridiculous, really. I was 55. He was probably just being friendly, but still. I turned and walked to the next row of stalls with my pulse tapping at my neck like a drum. "What are you so afraid of?" I asked myself. Not of men, not of attention, but of being seen again. Of someone noticing me, noticing this version of me. Older, quieter, still a little shattered around the edges. Not the woman I used to be, not the wife, just me. At the tomatoes, I felt a presence beside me. "The heirlooms are better grilled than raw," a voice said. I looked up. It was him. Honeyman, kind eyes, soft smile. A linen shirt that made him look like someone who read real books and watered his plants on Sundays. "I'm more of a soup woman," I replied, before I could stop myself. He grinned. "Then I won't argue with you." We talked for maybe 5 minutes. Tomatoes. Recipes. The overripe ones being the sweetest. He told me his name, Daniel. He lived in the next town over. Had recently retired, liked cooking, hated traffic, owned an old dog named Baxter. It was small talk, harmless. But as I walked away with my paper bag of peaches, I realized my hands were shaking. In the car, I sat in silence for 10 full minutes, trying to understand why such a brief conversation had left my chest fluttering, why I suddenly wanted to cry. It wasn't him. It wasn't attraction. It was me. I had spent so long folded inward, so long mourning, hiding, surviving, that I forgot how it felt to be seen by someone without history, someone who didn't know my pain, who looked at me and didn't see what I lost, only what I was. That night, I didn't replay his words. I replayed mine. How I had spoken without apology, without shrinking, without trying to prove my worth. And that, more than anything, felt like a beginning. Not of love, but of readiness. Chapter 10. The first time I danced alone. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of afternoon where sunlight slants just right through the kitchen window and the air smells like something between memory and hope. I was baking blueberry muffins, not for guests, not for grandkids, just for me. I had music playing, something soft, jazzy, upbeat, Ella Fitzgerald, cheek to cheek. And without thinking, without planning, I moved. Not a dance, really, just a small sway of the hips, a rhythm in the stirring, a bounce of the shoulder as I reached for the sugar. But then, my feet did what they used to do before I forgot joy had a sound. I spun, just once, then again, and I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because something inside me had burst open, light, weightless, unashamed. I danced, in my socks, on the kitchen floor still dusty from flour, alone. And here's the thing, I didn't feel lonely, not even for a second. I felt free, not from him, not from the past, but from the version of myself who had once needed permission to feel good. I didn't check the window to see if anyone was watching. I didn't worry if I looked ridiculous. I didn't stop. I twirled once more, hands in the air, head back, and let myself be, just be. When the song ended, I stood there panting, heart full, eyes wet, muffins forgotten in the oven, and I whispered to the quiet room, I'm still here. And the woman in that kitchen, flushed, happy, barefoot, and alive, was someone I was starting to love again. That night, I burned the muffins, but I didn't care. I made tea, sat on the porch with my hair still wild, and felt the kind of stillness that comes not from grief, but from grace. I didn't need a reason to smile. I didn't need a man to feel wanted. I didn't need a future to feel present. I just needed that moment, that dance, that truth. I am more than what I lost. I am what I choose to become. Chapter 11. A call from my daughter. It was just past 8 when the phone rang. I was curled up on the couch, blanket tucked under my chin, a half-read novel resting on my chest. The house smelled like lavender and ginger tea. I had just started to feel settled. I looked at the screen. Emily, my daughter. Hi, Mom, she said. Her voice still carried the same softness it did when she was 5, but now there was an edge. Tiredness, maybe, or something heavier. Hi, sweetheart. Everything okay? A pause. Then, quietly, yeah, I had a hard day, and I guess I wanted to hear your voice. I sat up straighter. My mother heart still responded like it always did, instantly, instinctively. Talk to me, I said. She sighed, that long exhale that carried more than words ever could. It's nothing specific, just work, James, the kids. I'm always running, you know? I feel like I'm living on autopilot, and I don't even know who I'm doing it for anymore. Silence passed between us, and I felt it. That familiar ache, the echo of my own life. This was me, 10 years ago, 15, 30. Do you ever feel like that? She asked. And I didn't lie. I did, for a long time. And now? I smiled. Now, I'm learning to live for myself. She was quiet again. That sounds selfish, she said, and also kind of beautiful. It's not selfish, I replied gently. It's survival, and it's overdue. There was something fragile in her voice when she spoke next. I think I'm afraid to stop. afraid that if I really slow down, everything will fall apart. Or, I said, you might finally feel whole. We talked for almost an hour, about little things, the kids, her garden, a book she wanted to read but hadn't had time for. But underneath it all was this quiet, trembling question neither of us said aloud. How do you begin again when the life you built doesn't feel like yours anymore? Before we said goodbye, she whispered, I'm proud of you, Mom. And something inside me cracked open, because for so long I had wanted to be strong for her. And now I realized, being honest, being broken and brave and real, that was the strength she needed to see. After the call, I stood by the window. The stars were out, soft and scattered, like silver freckles across the sky. And I whispered, not just to the night, but to the woman I had raised, you're allowed to want more. You're allowed to begin again. You're allowed to be your own. Chapter 12, The Invitation. It arrived in the mail, a cream-colored envelope tucked between a bill and a grocery flyer. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in ink I recognized before I even opened it. Martin Delaney. We'd gone to school together. He was a year ahead, polite, quiet, bookish. The kind of boy I never thought noticed me, and perhaps he didn't, not then. But I remembered him now, his laugh, the way he used to sit with the old librarian during lunch, listening like her stories were gospel. I opened the letter slowly. Inside, a simple note. Marie, I heard about you, not from gossip, but from your painting at the cafe downtown. Yes, I knew it was yours the second I saw it. I'm back in town for a few weeks. There's a gallery opening this Saturday. It's small, local, nothing fancy. But I'd like to see you there. No pressure, just a conversation. Just two people who used to share the same sky. Yours, Martin. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I wasn't sure how I felt. Was I ready to be seen like that? By someone who remembered me before I became somebody's wife? By someone who might see more than just survival in my eyes? I walked around with the note in my pocket all day. I ran errands, folded laundry, baked a pie that didn't need baking, just to keep my hands moving. But my mind stayed fixed on the letter, not on Martin exactly, but on what it meant. An invitation to go, to be seen, to be new, or perhaps remembered. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, not to judge, not to critique, but to ask, would you go if no one else ever knew? Would you go just for you? The answer came not as a yes, but as a breath, a soft exhale, a loosening. I would go, not for him, not for the past, but because part of me still wanted to believe that the story wasn't over. And maybe this chapter was about courage, even if it was just showing up. Chapter 13, What I Wore to Be Myself. It wasn't about the dress, not really, but it started there, standing in front of the open closet, running my fingers over hangers like I was reading Braille. Silk, cotton, linen, black, beige, muted blue, so many clothes I'd worn for him, dinners, church, company parties, holidays where I smiled too tightly. I had forgotten what I liked, what I felt good in, what belonged to me. And then, tucked behind an old cardigan, I found it. A dress I'd bought years ago and never wore. Dusty rose, soft, flowing, the kind of fabric that moved when you breathed, as if it had its own rhythm. I slipped it on, no shapewear, no jewelry, no expectation, just skin and fabric and me. I looked in the mirror and waited for judgment, but it didn't come. Instead, I saw her, that woman I used to be before I became everyone else's version of useful. She looked tired, strong, a little soft around the edges, but she looked present, and I whispered, "You can go like this. You don't have to disappear to be accepted." Perfume next, not the kind he liked, not the expensive bottle that smelled like someone else's wife. I chose something floral, powdery, a little wild, like lilac and wine through an open window. It made me feel awake. Shoes, comfortable, makeup, light, hair, loosened, not curled. I didn't want to become someone else. I wanted to arrive as myself, even if no one clapped, even if no one turned, even if Martin looked and politely nodded and nothing ever came of it. It didn't matter. This was for me. Showing up was the victory. Before I left the house, I paused at the door, put a hand to my heart, felt the small thrum of bravery, not loud, but certain. And I stepped out into the evening, not hoping to be chosen, but ready to be seen. Chapter 14, The Art of Conversation. The gallery was tucked into the corner of an old brick building, the kind you pass 100 times without noticing, until you're finally ready to see it. The inside was small, warm, and humming with quiet energy. Wooden floors, local paintings, people speaking in the hush reserved for art and vulnerability. I stepped inside, breath held. I hadn't been to a gallery in over 20 years. Not since I was someone else's plus one. Not since I stood quietly beside someone who didn't notice when I disappeared inside a frame. But tonight I was alone, and I was here for me. He found me by the abstracts. Martin, taller than I remembered, his hair more silver now, his face softened by time, not in a way that dulled him, but in a way that made him more true. "Marie," he said with that gentle voice. "You came." I did, I smiled. "You're not easy to ignore, you know." He laughed, and in that sound, familiar and new, I felt something unclench in my chest. We didn't talk about the past. Not right away. Instead, we wandered the gallery, speaking in the language of color and shape. "This one feels like grief," he said at one point, standing before a canvas filled with jagged gray lines. "Or survival," I added. "The kind where no one claps, but you're still breathing." He turned to me, nodded slowly, like I'd said something sacred. Later, with small glasses of wine in hand, we stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky dusky and painted with the first stars. We stood in silence for a while, not awkward, not anxious, just still. Then he said, "I always wondered what happened to you. You sort of vanished after graduation." "Life happened," I said. "Marriage, kids, work, grief, you know, the usual." "Yes," he said gently. "I do." He didn't ask about my ex-husband. He didn't ask what I was doing there alone. He just stood beside me, a presence, not a question. And I realized this is what I've been missing. Not romance, not rescue, but companionship that doesn't demand explanation. "Thank you," I said quietly. He looked over. "For what?" "For seeing me." He didn't smile, didn't make it dramatic. He just answered, "I always did that night as I drove home with the windows half down and the scent of city and spring in the air. I felt no confusion, no butterflies, no need to define what had just happened. All I knew was this: something opened, and whatever came next, friendship, silence, letters, or simply a moment never repeated, it was enough. Because I showed up, and I was seen. Chapter 15, Things That Bloom Late. The house was quiet when I got home. No porch light left on for me. No shoes by the door. No voice calling from the next room. But for the first time in what felt like years, the quiet didn't ache. It comforted me. It welcomed me back, not to loneliness, but to solitude. I kicked off my shoes, hung the dress on the back of a chair, poured myself a glass of water, and opened the windows wide. And then I stood still. In the silence, in the air that smelled faintly of lilac and dust and freedom. I thought of Martin, his quiet presence, his easy listening eyes. But more than him, I thought of myself, the woman who showed up, the one who didn't shrink, the one who didn't wait to be chosen, but chose herself. I walked barefoot through the house, noticing for the first time in ages how soft the rug felt beneath my soles, how the kitchen clock ticked just slightly off beat, how my reflection in the window looked lighter. And then I smiled, because I realized something. I was blooming, not suddenly, not all at once, not with fireworks, but slowly, deliberately, like a flower that had spent years underground waiting for the frost to pass. I lit a candle, not because I needed light, but because it felt like a ritual, a way to say, you survived, you came back, you are still becoming. I didn't write in my journal that night, didn't read, didn't reach for anyone. I just let the feeling settle, that quiet wonder that maybe, just maybe, life begins again right where we thought it had ended. And in the stillness of my own home, I whispered, things that bloom late are often the ones that last the longest. Chapter 16. The day I stopped apologizing. It started with something small. A woman at the grocery store bumped into me with her cart. I instinctively said, "Oh, sorry." She didn't even glance back. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in awakening. Why did I apologize? What was I sorry for? I stood there holding a box of tea frozen in the middle of an aisle full of fluorescent light and cereal. And I realized I had been apologizing my entire life for taking up space, for asking questions, for being too quiet then too emotional, for dreaming too big, then for settling too small, for aging, for grieving too long, for speaking when I shouldn't, for staying silent when I should have spoken. I apologized for being. That afternoon, I went home and sat at the table with a blank piece of paper. At the top, I wrote, things I will no longer apologize for. And I made a list, needing rest, saying no, wanting more, growing slowly, crying during songs, laughing too loud, wanting to be touched, eating the last slice, rebuilding, starting over, choosing joy, missing people who didn't stay, forgiving people who didn't ask. And at the bottom, I wrote, being a woman who dares to become herself, again and again. Something in me shifted that day, not loudly, not publicly, but when I spoke after that, at the bookstore, at the gallery, even to Emily on the phone, my voice was just a little stronger, just a little closer to my chest, like I had finally moved it back to where it belonged. I didn't need everyone to understand. I didn't need their permission anymore. I only needed one thing, to belong to myself. So when I walked through the streets that evening, scarf loose around my neck, wind in my hair, I didn't duck my head. I didn't rush. I moved slowly, proudly, fully. And I said it aloud, to no one in particular, I'm not sorry anymore. Chapter 18. The morning I woke up whole. I didn't wake to birdsong or sunlight. There was no dramatic sky, no perfect moment. I woke to the sound of the radiator clicking and the slow hush of wind moving through the trees. But I opened my eyes, and nothing hurt. Not my chest, not my throat, not that deep part behind the ribs that used to feel hollow. It was just quiet. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't dread the day. I stretched, not like someone crawling out of sleep, but like someone returning to her own skin. It felt unfamiliar, this ease. No ache in my heart, no apology in my breath, just warmth and breath and me. In the mirror, I saw lines, soft ones at the corners of my eyes, the shape of a woman who had lived. And for once, I didn't pull back, didn't wish them gone. I touched my cheek and whispered, "You're still here." And not as a fragment, not as a version, but whole. I made coffee in my favorite mug, the one with the small chip on the rim, the one that used to belong to my mother. And I stood barefoot on the kitchen tiles, drinking it slowly, not rushing to do, not anxious to fill space, not needing to be needed, because for the first time, being was enough. I didn't belong to grief. I didn't belong to silence. I didn't belong to someone else's story. I belonged to me. And the strangest part, there was no fireworks, no great relief, just this soft knowing, this is who I am now, not broken, not starting over, not becoming, just here, alive, loved, complete. Chapter 19. What I said when he called again. It was late afternoon when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved. Just 10 digits and a flicker of instinct. but something told me to pick it up. "Hello?" I said. And then silence. A breath, then a voice I knew better than my own once. "Marie, it's me." For a moment, time didn't stop. It just paused, like a held breath before the drop. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel longing. I just waited. "How have you been?" he asked. His voice was careful, as if he wasn't sure who I'd become, and I wasn't sure why he was calling. But I said the truth better. There was a pause, a shift in the tone, like my answer wasn't what he expected. He cleared his throat. "I've thought about you, a lot." I didn't say anything, because sometimes silence says more than defense. I just wanted to hear your voice. Once those words would have undone me. I would have clung to them, searched for meaning, wondered if it meant maybe. But not now. Not after the dancing. Not after the letter from Emily. Not after mornings spent whole. "I don't think about you anymore," I said gently. Not cruel, not sharp, just true. "That's not anger, it's peace." He exhaled. I heard it. "I miss you," he said. I closed my eyes and saw my life. My quiet evenings, my laughter, my freedom. And I replied, "I think you miss the version of me who didn't know herself yet." The silence after that was heavy, but it didn't belong to me. I waited, let him carry it. Eventually, he said, "I'm glad you're okay," and I meant it when I answered, "So am I." I didn't ask why he really called, didn't dig for closure, because I had already given it to myself. I didn't need his regret, didn't need his validation. I needed only this, the power to choose my own ending. And so I said goodbye, softly, clearly, like someone closing a door without slamming it. Chapter 20, The Garden I Planted for Myself. I bought the first packet of seeds in April, wildflowers. Not the tidy, manicured kind, the ones that bloom a little wild, a little unruly, the way I always wished I could be. They didn't come with a guide, just a note on the back, scatter freely, water gently, wait with hope. And somehow, those 3 sentences felt like a sermon. The yard behind my cottage wasn't much, just patchy grass, a few stubborn weeds, and a rusted watering can left by the previous tenant. But I stood there, seeds in hand, heart wide open, and began. I didn't overthink it. I knelt in the dirt, felt the earth under my nails, drew short rows with my fingers and poured the future into them. It felt absurdly emotional, planting something that wouldn't bloom for weeks, something no one else might even see. But it wasn't about them. It was for me. Every morning I'd go out barefoot, check the soil, talk to it like an old friend. "Not yet," I'd whisper. "That's okay. I know what it's like to take your time." The first green broke through after 10 days, just a shy curl, barely there. And I cried. Not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because I knew what it meant to be buried, to sit in the dark, to wonder if you'd ever rise again. And this tiny stem said, "Yes, you will, maybe slowly, but you will." Soon, the space became mine. I bought a bench, hung wind chimes, painted stones with words like enough and here and begin. I even started bringing my tea out at sunrise, just to sit in the stillness and listen to the garden grow. No performance, no audience, just the soft miracle of tending to something. After you've been untended for years, the garden didn't ask for perfection. It asked for presence, and in return, it gave me beauty. Not all at once, but steadily. The same way healing came, the same way I came back to myself. One morning, months later, I looked at the wildflowers, finally in bloom, vivid, unapologetic, free. And I whispered to them, "You look like me." Chapter 22, When I Taught a Woman to Breathe. It wasn't planned. Nothing about that afternoon was supposed to be special. Just 6 women in a circle at the library's side room. No stage, no microphones, just folding chairs and tea in paper cups. They'd asked me to speak, not as an expert, not as a therapist, just as a woman who had been through something and come back. I was nervous. What do you say to women with their own bruises? What words could possibly reach those who are still quietly unraveling? I stood up with shaking hands, heart loud in my chest. I'm not here to teach you how to be okay, I began. I'm here to tell you that it's okay if you're not. Something shifted in the room. One woman crossed her arms, not out of defensiveness, but protection. Another looked down at her lap. I breathed in, and then I told them about the marriage, the silence, the nights I curled into myself, wondering who I was without someone else's name attached to mine, about the cottage, the garden, the slow walk back to myself. And when I paused, I said something I hadn't planned. The first thing I had to relearn was how to breathe. Not shallow, not silent, but fully. I asked them all to close their eyes, to put a hand on their chest, and I guided them through it. One breath, then another, not for control, not for stillness, but to remember they're alive. One woman cried. Another whispered afterward, I haven't taken a breath like that in years. And I smiled, not with pride, but with recognition, because I remembered. I remembered what it was like to be so used to holding your breath that the very idea of relief felt dangerous. That night, I walked home slowly, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to savor the feeling. I gave something, not perfection, not answers, but presence. And sometimes that's enough to help someone remember their name. Chapter 23, Letters I Never Sent. I bought a new notebook, the kind with thick paper and a linen cover. Not because I needed it, but because something in me whispered, you're ready to write it all down. Not the stories I'd tell the world, the ones I couldn't, the truths that had no room in polite conversations, the griefs that never got closure, the forgiveness I never gave or asked for. I lit a candle, sat at my kitchen table, and wrote the first name. To my mother, you were softer than people thought. You didn't say I love you, but you cooked it, cleaned it, folded it into my pillow. I wish you'd told me that breaking wasn't failure. I wish you'd shown me how to rest, but you did the best you could with what you were given, and I forgive you now, not because you need it, but because I do. The next, to my husband, you loved the version of me who didn't know how to ask for more, and when I started wanting things, like space, truth, softness, you disappeared. You didn't break me. I broke trying to hold us both together. And now, I'm not angry. I just see clearly we were a season I survived the winter. And I'm planting spring now, without you. Then, the hardest one. To the woman I was at 20, you were so desperate to be enough, you disappeared inside everyone you loved. You said yes when your soul begged for no. You smiled with lips that wanted to scream. But I see you now. I hold you now. You were never weak. You were just never taught that being full of yourself isn't arrogance. It's survival. And I won't shame you anymore. I won't silence you. You got me here. And now I'm writing the rest. I closed the notebook. Didn't reread. Didn't second guess. I placed it in the drawer like a sealed offering. Not to forget, but to release. The past no longer needed to echo in my chest. I'd finally said what needed to be said, and I didn't need replies. Chapter 24, The Night I Danced Alone. It was almost midnight when the music started. Not from a neighbor's window, not from the TV, but from the old radio in my kitchen. I must have left the dial turned just enough. Some late-night station playing songs from another lifetime. And it wasn't even a song I knew. It just moved. I stood there, in my sleep shirt and bare feet, holding a cup of tea gone cold, and something inside me pulsed. A rhythm, a hum, a yes. I didn't think, didn't plan, didn't check if the curtains were drawn. I just started dancing. At first it was small, a sway of the hips, a slow turn of the wrist, a tapping of toes on tile. Then it grew. I let my arms stretch, my back arch, my breath follow the beat. No one was watching, which meant for once I wasn't performing. The woman in the kitchen, that was me. 30 years of holding back melting into 5 minutes of surrender. I laughed. Not because something was funny, but because I was free. I spun, hair wild, hands wide open, music in my bones like I'd swallowed light. And I thought, this is joy, not the kind that arrives wrapped in a perfect day, but the kind that rises quietly when no one is expecting it. When the song faded, I stood still, heart racing, eyes closed, tears on my cheeks, not from sadness, from the miracle of motion, of aliveness, of being here. I didn't try to name the feeling. I didn't rush to hold it. I just whispered to the empty room, I'm still in here. Chapter 25, A Bench in the Sun. I didn't go to the park to think, or to write, or to find anything. I just wanted sun on my face, warmth on my skin, quiet in my lungs. There's a bench near the duck pond, the old kind, iron arms and wood faded to gray. I've sat there a dozen times before, but this day felt different. The sun wasn't loud, it was kind, like it knew I needed light but not heat. A woman was already there, older than me, white braid, blue scarf, face full of years and stories she hadn't spoken yet. I asked if I could sit. She nodded, scooting over with a gentle smile. We sat in silence, not awkward, just still. She fed birds from a small brown bag. After a while, she said, they always come back, don't they? I looked at the birds, then realized she wasn't just talking about them. Sometimes, I said, if they're ready. She smiled again, slower this time. You've come back to yourself, she said simply. I blinked. How do you know? I've worn that look, she said. The quiet, the wait, the return. You're lighter now. But not empty, just home. I didn't reply right away. The lump in my throat said more than words. She handed me a sunflower seed and whispered, plant it, not because it'll bloom fast, but because you will. And then she stood, nodded once, and walked away, as if she'd said exactly what she came to say. I sat alone for a while, palm open, seed small and warm, and I thought, sometimes the universe sends you back to yourself, wearing a blue scarf and a soft voice. Chapter 26. If you're reading this. Written as a letter, it is not addressed to anyone in particular. It is addressed to you, to anyone who reads and searches for themselves in silence. This letter is not a summary, but a hug, because Marie's life is not an instruction manual. It is proof that after the ruins, you can live truly. If you're reading this, it means you've lost something, maybe someone, maybe yourself, maybe both. It means you've cried in the dark, alone. You've stood in kitchens not recognizing your own body. You've stared at the mirror and whispered, where did I go? And still, you're here. That alone makes you brave. I don't know your story, but I know how it feels to carry silence like a second skin, to be both the fire and the ashes. I want to tell you something no one told me. You are allowed to begin again, not because you've healed, not because you've earned it, but because you exist. That is enough. Your softness is not weakness. Your loneliness is not a flaw. And your desire for more, it is not selfish. It is holy. You don't need a permission slip to build a life that fits. You can leave what hurt. You can plant new things. You can dance barefoot at midnight. You can forgive yourself. And if no one has said it to you lately, let me be the first. I'm proud of you. For surviving, for staying, for dreaming, even with trembling hands. There is no perfect ending, just a life, lived as truly as you can bear it. That is enough, and so are you. With love, Marie.